We are here today with Charlie Grinnell, the CEO and co-founder of RightMetric, a subscription-based insights and research platform. Charlie has spent his career in marketing and working with incredible brands like Arc'teryx, Red Bull, and Aritzia. Thanks for joining, Charlie.
Thanks for having me today. Great to be here.
You have such a huge breadth of experience. We're going to dive into a couple of these sort of specific areas that you've worked in. You've worked at Red Bull, category leading consumer, super famous for their incredible events marketing. That seems like it's worked really well for them and certainly become very famous, especially in the sort of like extreme sports world. What can software companies learn from a company like Red Bull?
Yeah, I mean, Red Bull has a special place in my heart. It shaped me into the marketer that I am today, I think. And I guess I can kind of take a step back before I answer the question of like what software companies can learn. Is they were so early on so many different things from a marketing perspective. Like they were kind of the original gangsters of content marketing. I think what's been so fascinating, the trend that I would like overarching kind of like lump all that under is marketing like a media company, right? And so yes, they have events and they do events and they do, you know, all of these other different things, but the overarching piece is marketing like a media company, right? And so you see that with their content engine, you see that with how they approach things. And I think we're actually starting to see that in technology, and I can make some like different parallels here. So number one, HubSpot buying The Hustle. That's HubSpot marketing like a media company, right? That's them being like, we are not going to be a software B2B company. We're going to go out and acquire a media company, The Hustle, and use that to then like fuel this thing. They're doing that with HubSpot Podcast Network, you know, big thing. Another, I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, a Vancouver-based company, Thinkific, right? Use software for creators to have to build courses. They started a media company about like the creator economy. And so like newsletter, podcast, site, like all of those different things. And so what we're starting to see is not only are consumer brands taking this thing that Red Bull and many other brands have done, Airbnb, you know, there's examples of Airbnb and all these different things, but in the software space, thinking about yourself as a media company is just such a great strategy. And I think what it boils down to is this: whether you buy our product or not, you are going to spend time with us. And I think that is such a fascinating thing, right? So like I think about when I was working at Red Bull, it was like whether they went and bought the sugar water or not, we hope they do, but we want them to spend time with our content. And if we think about like how competitive today's world is, like there's so many different distractions out there. That's just a really smart way to think about it, is like, how can I get people to spend time so that when they're ready to buy, if marketing's job is like keeping people ready until they're ready to buy, keeping people interested until they're ready to buy, that's something that really comes to mind. And so I think like that's why we've seen the rise of like content marketing. It's really just being like, how can we how can we become a media company and you know, say something? What would we say? What would we stand for if we weren't selling a product? And so I think that's another thing all the time is when we talk to our customers is, oh, well, we sell, you know, at Aritzia, we sell clothing and fashion. And I was like, okay, if we weren't selling clothing, what would we talk about? What is interesting for us? What is something that we know that our consumers would want to hear about and be interested in that isn't just like, buy this for $29.99 or buy this for you know $200 or like whatever the thing is. And so that's, I think, this overarching trend. And there's so much that can be learned there from a software company perspective, because usually with software, there's a ton of education that needs to happen. There's a ton of use cases that need to happen. There's different intricacies for different environments, different industries, like that. It goes on and on and on. So there's no shortage of amazing content that you can create. And that's maybe on the solution side, but then on the problem side, like talking about shaping up the problems. Hey, are you this person? Do you have this type of problem? Like there's so many different ways that you can go. And so overarching, I just think marketing like a media company, that kind of ethos plugs into all of your different marketing activities, whether you're running events in person or virtual, whether you're sponsoring an athlete in Red Bull's case, whether you're, you know, co-marketing, thinking about it through that media company lens is just something that's very top of mind.
God, I love that framing. It's so interesting because when you put it in that way, I think too about, you know, media really understands that stories impart feelings and leave people feeling a certain way. And Red Bull did such a good job in particular, like all of the events and all of the content that they were putting out was about feeling just bad ass. You know, it's like, if there's like one way to describe like the Red Bull brand, like that's kind of how I think about it, feeling badass.
And I think right. But it goes back to like all of those things that happen. It's like, how are you leveraging that stuff and amplifying it, right? And
Yeah.
I just go back to the events side of things are amazing. I've been to many of those events as a consumer and then also as like an employee.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that allowed many businesses to grow is that like thinking like a media company and getting that stuff out there. And so I just think it's such a great strategy. And like I said, there's tons and tons of examples. I listed a handful, but I'm sure there's probably a bunch of other companies out there that are going, well, we do that. Like those are just the ones that kind of came to mind for me.
Absolutely. Gotta love that framing.
Yeah.
So talking about your company, RightMetric, can you describe how your business works? Like what your just like actually the nerdy layer of like, what is your business model and have you thought about different models or different ways to monetize that offering?
Absolutely. So we actually started out as a regular research company. And now what we've moved into is we're kind of trying to frame ourselves or position ourselves in this way as research as a service. So, everybody wants to do blank as a service. We actually take a lot of inspiration from a couple different companies. One's called Shuttle Rock and one is called Superside, and they're trying to position themselves as creative as a service, right? So as there's more and more need for different assets for performance marketing, right? Instead of like having like, hey, we have 3 images, now it's like, we want 30 of those things so we can A/B test them really rapidly and like find the best thing. Like the demand for content is through the roof. Traditional agency model doesn't really work for that. So that's kind of where this creative as a service thing came. And that's kind of how we landed on research as a service. And so how we think about it was my co-founder and I, we both worked brand and agency side previous to this. And we always had a really good idea of our own data. So, when I was at Red Bull, when I was at Aritzia, I knew, hey, this is how many people come to our site. This is how many people subscribe to our email newsletters. This is who our social audience is. This is what they like. This is what they don't like. That's kind of been the tech data story for the last decade, is like, use your data to make decisions, right? Like we're all sitting here going, of course, duh. We think the next decade is going to be looking externally and kind of like going like this. Like if everyone's been doing this, they have one eye covered, and uncovering that other eye and looking externally provides a more complete holistic picture so that you can then be armed as a strategist to make a better decision. So if you have your existing customers, then you want to go and look at, okay, who is that target audience that we're still trying to reach? So people who are similar, who could be customers, but aren't yet customers, what can we learn about them? And so, there's a bunch of different data tools out there that you can use, but that's the problem. There's a bunch of different data tools out there that you have to use. And so it's very fragmented. It's very time consuming, and marketers are busy. When I was at Aritzia, I'd get the like state of fashion report and I'm like, okay, great. Like this tells me like a little bit, but like, what do I do with this? Whereas like I had very specific questions of how do I build our influencer gifting strategy? Or which channel should we be prioritizing between these two right now based on the audience that we're trying to reach in the US? That was at the time we were trying to really grow in the US. So like those types of specific niche questions, I can't just be like, we surveyed whatever and like off we go. And I'm not trying to like throw shade on surveying or focus groups. Like I think there is that type of research has a specific purpose. But when you are like working as a digital strategist or a planner, trying to figure out like what should we do and why, both from like a strategic layer, but also from a tactical layer, we just think that this kind of like external insight is such a cheat code because it gives you the full picture, right?
How do you think that growth teams should approach user research? And are there any methods that are particularly useful to that type of work?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. Number one, like I have a sign above my head that says research guide strategy. Number one, just do research, please. Like if you're a strategist and you're not doing research, like just please do it. Cause like otherwise literally what are you doing? Like that's a spiky POV that might trigger some people, but I'm also like, are you a strategist if you're actually not doing research? I don't know. Like that's really hard. That's a hard sell to me. So, if you want to beat me up in the comments of this thing, like fire away. But I think about, how I think about it is what people say versus what people do are massively different. And so like, that's kind of another thing as to like why our business sits more in that like behavioral side of things is because everybody lies. And there's actually like one of my favorite books. It's called Everybody Lies. And I have it. It's on the shelf behind me. It's called Everybody Lies. And it's by this guy named Seth Stevens Dewitowitz, and he's like he was a data scientist, PhD data scientist at Google. And the whole thesis of the book is, his thesis is, Google search data is the most important data set in the history of humanity because it gives us a completely unbiased look into the human psyche. So where I go with all that is I'm like, I think, again, surveys and focus groups have merit for some things, but I also think that in the book, he makes a very compelling case about how people lie. And one of the examples he gives is, he talks about, let's say you're coming back from a trip from the airport and you're walking out and you've just gotten your bags and someone goes, hey, can I stop you and ask you for a question? And you stop and ask, or you stop and answer, and they go, where did you go? Maybe let's say I went to Mexico on a vacation to get some sun. And where did you stay? Oh, I stayed here. Who did you book with? Oh, I booked with, Air Canada. And did you get the best price on your flight? Yep. And then like off I go. I don't know if I got the best price on my site, but all of a sudden that's a data point. And there's no like ill intent there, but like what we say, because I want to be seen as favorable in the interviewer's eyes, right? Or the person that's asking the question. So like, again, what we say versus what we do are two very different things. I think it's important to know what people say, and I think it's important to know what people do, and then look at what are the similarities and what are the differences and really reflect on those. Number two, do it multiple ways. And it's kind of the reason why I say to do it multiple ways is we have this phrase that we use a lot internally is like, how can you start to triangulate the truth? Right. And so like you're trying to find something in the middle. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm going to look at, I'm going to do a focus group, and then I'm going to do, looking at our own data. And then I'm going to do maybe some competitive intelligence. And then I'm going to do some of this audience research. And by all of those different things are signals. And it's never going to be like X equals 10. This is exactly what you should do. But that's all like removing blind spots so that you can be armed to make the best decision, right? And we're never going to get to X equals 10. There's always going to be there's never something that's completely certain, but there's a lot of things that we can do to give ourselves perspective and give ourselves a better opportunity to make the right decision for our business.
Oh, exactly. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be taking clips of this and maybe passively aggressively sending it to other people.
Yeah, sorry in advance for whoever's going to receive this.
Exactly.
I don't know. I guess maybe because like I've been on that side, right? Like I've been on that side where I'm like, it's crazy that like, we can't agree that the sky is blue and the grass is green. It's like, well, yeah, we have to look. And the amount of money that's spent on marketing without looking is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Like, hey, well, we have a $50 million budget to spend on this, that, and the other thing. And you're like, okay, like, why are you doing that? Oh, well, because, Susan told us that we've always done it that way. So we're going to do it that way. And you're like, last time I checked, Susan isn't the one buying the product. So like, let's get an understanding of that. So I think that's the thing is like in marketing, in our ivory towers of marketing, we always seem to think like we know best. And I think like in 6 years of running our company, the thing I can tell you, like, thousands of pieces of research that we've done across industries, across sectors for like some huge brands. One thing I can consistently tell you is I know nothing. And like anything about any hypothesis that I might have about like a stereotype or like this is going to happen, I learn something every time where I'm like, that's crazy. And so like, that's, I think the thing is like, when you start to look at this, you challenge your own assumptions and you go, huh? And so that's kind of where we've landed is like, I don't know. Let's see what the audience says. They're the ultimate judge of like what's good or not good. Me in marketing, I can do all the right things and think, yeah, I should do this, that, and the other thing. But like at the end of the day, what does the consumer or the audience want? That's the judge.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so cool. Thank you so much, Charlie. It's been so great to spend some time with you.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it.